Hello everyone and welcome to FiST Chat, the vodcast that features discussions on the topics of film, science and technology. My name is Ben Warner and joining me once again on this fine spring morning is my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are you doing today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. Hello, FiST Chat fans. It's nice to be on here and talk a little bit about some social media and some electioneering, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting time, well, obviously with the federal election in Australia coming up, but it also has parallels with last year's presidential election in America and the use of social media. And we'll get into that today. Just one thing I forgot to mention before we got on, Steve. I'll just overlay some footage of a rather spectacular sunset that I took off the balcony here yesterday. It was rather unique. It made me think actually of science, because the way it was just raining just the right amount. There was just the right amount of condensation, and just the way the light sort of bounced off of the moisture in the air created a rather spectacular orange fiery sky that you don't normally see. So it's just one of those natural wonders that is always good to sort of see with your own eyes.
That's right. Those sorts of colours always say something like spring or autumn is imminent.
Absolutely. Alrighty, before we get into our topic today, don't forget our website, FiSTChat.com. You can get all of our links there. You can subscribe to our audio via iTunes, SoundCloud, and our RSS feeds, and our videos on YouTube, Vimeo, and Digicosm TV. You can interact with us on Twitter, Google+, and Facebook, so I'd love to hear from you there. We've got our ebook, The FiST Report, at fistreport.com, only 99 cents and hosted on Amazon, so hopefully you can grab a copy and help to support the show. And we've also got our supplementary content, the weekly blogs, photography on Instagram and Flickr. And if you'd be so kind, please recommend us to anyone who you think may be interested in our weekly discussions on film, science and technology. Now, we're in the midst of a federal election campaign in Australia. A rather dull one, if I don't say so myself. Usually these...
I think everyone knows the result already.
We knew the result for about 3 years, didn't we?
Yeah, I think
so. But one interesting aspect to it that's really come into the fore, it's sort of been building in the past maybe 2 elections maybe, and it's probably informed by a lot of what's been happening overseas, but social media has really become a pivotal tool in an election campaign. We've been sort of bombarded, with the usual TV ads and whatnot, but and the hokey flies you get in the mailbox, but the actual real power that's happening at the moment is the Facebook liking and tweeting and posting that our wannabe leaders are sending out at the moment, and with different strategies too, I think. I would say, obviously with our side of things, there's 2 major parties, and one of them I think is pushing it a little bit more than the other, only because one is probably more on top of the social media cycle than the other. The other's a bit more old-fashioned, I would say. But it does kind of raise the possibility. Are they really connecting and reaching all these people on social media? I'm assuming it would be the younger generation that they're aiming at,
I guess so, and I think, but one thing that's really interesting and is different between Australia and America, for instance, is, or Australia and just about anywhere else in the democratised world, is that Australians have to show up on voting day. Okay, they don't have to, technically they don't have to vote, but they do have to go and get their name crossed off, so they have to attend a polling station. So just on that, with social media, I don't think you're mobilising anyone to vote. You might be aggregating people with like-minded views, but in the States, by comparison, I think it probably worked a lot more effectively in encouraging people who kind of, believe in one side of politics but may or may not vote. It might encourage them to get down to the polling station.
Yeah, well, just with if we touch briefly on the Obama campaign from last year, and there's quite a few articles on this on the net, so you can look this up for yourselves. But they were saying in 2008, John McCain was deaf social media wise, and Obama was all over it. In 2012, the Romney campaign. They did a little bit, but they really didn't come anywhere near as close as what the Obama team were doing in terms of pushing it out. And that just gave him a far superior reach to get his word out there and want it, to get people to vote for him. Yeah, but like you said, that might work a lot better in a democracy where you can choose to vote rather than you have to vote.
Well, that's right. Well, in Australia, for instance, then I think the thing is that it's just adds to the saturation of media coverage. So if you're on top and you've got a good message and you've got good networks to get that message out through, then in Australia, that's where the social media message is really strong. I mean, in any election, I think anywhere in the world, and I'm not sure what the figures are exactly, it's actually probably only about 1 in every 5 people is an actual swing voter, or their vote, certainly would sway an election outcome. And so, it's a matter of using these things well. I mean, interestingly, during the week, old tech, low tech Clive Palmer, who's a bit of well, he's got a dinosaur park and wants to rebuild the Titanic for those of you who aren't in Australia, sent me a couple of emails asking me to vote for him. So I don't think he's discovered Twitter or Facebook yet. I've seen a number of posts and ads come through my networks on Facebook, and some of them are very clever. Like some of them have come from the Electoral Commission, which encourage people to vote, but others come from the political parties, and they're just designed to engage you with a bit of humour without actually telling that you who they're trying to get you to vote for. So that's interesting too. What do you think about those sorts of techniques, Ben?
I don't know. I just, for me, just on the receiving end of a lot of this stuff, it just seems more noise to me. And especially in this particular campaign, it just isn't an engaging campaign at all. If it was one of those things where there was a very clear choice and a very sort of both candidates were running a very dynamic campaign with ideas and something that they really want to push for, then maybe it would be more engaging. But not that I want to get all political on this show at the moment, but it's a lot of what the major parties are doing this time is very, very unengaging and uninspiring. And I don't know if the social media side of things is really making a difference in that respect.
Well, that's right. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. And I don't want to get personal, but you've got one, intensely egotistical personality, and you've got one that's very dour and very one-dimensional. And I'll let the people out there work out
who that is.
Who's who. But I mean, and I don't think that there's messages through social media really cut through. Most of the social media chatter that I've seen that's politically based, certainly on Twitter, you would say would be more progressive, so probably more Labor leaning, and it's not really seems to be boosting or presenting any of the great things that the Labor Party have done. It's more about the what will happen when Abbott gets in, or deriding Abbott. Whereas I guess the Liberals have kind of tried to keep it nice and clean, and interestingly, their social media I find reasonably disinteresting because it's very one-dimensional. It's just an extension of their advertising campaigns with a few what appear to be supporters trying to do some inventive posts and things that don't look so campaign headquarters-ish, but I can pick them.
Yeah, exactly. So just finally, I mean, I just thought then that maybe social media is only as good as the message that it's intending to deliver. Like any other form of, say, even like any form of advertising as well that they might put out there to try and get your vote. If it's not there, I don't think tweeting about it or posting about it's going to make much of a difference.
I mean, interestingly, Obama engaged, I forget what the fellow's name is, but he engaged somebody who understood social media networks and mobilized supporters for Obama through those networks. And as I say, that then gets them to turn up on polling day. Yeah. In Australia, 95% of people will turn up, at the polls on polling day anyway. And so, they've probably made up their mind, and if they haven't, they're still going to vote the way they did last time, or make a mistake on the ballot paper or something. But just interestingly as well, and this is just for a bit of humour for those who know Australian political commentary, Andrew Bolt, who might be described as a conservative or highly conservative political commentator, was complaining about the left-wing people on Twitter. Twitter's got a left-wing bias, which just goes to show that he doesn't get it at all either. So, did you see that, mate?
I didn't. I don't know if Twitter's got a bias, but it's definitely. I don't know if it's left-wing or something else.
I think what I'll do is I'll find the link and we'll post it so people can have a laugh at what he did and how he got caught out in a big social media faux pas. Very funny.
Absolutely. All right, we might draw a line under that and move on to our news bites now. Now, for change of pace, our film news bite: Pacific Rim designed to advance US cultural domination of China. This one came from The Guardian. Pacific Rim sort of had a ho-hum response in the US. Didn't really sort of take off, but it's doing pretty well in China, and not really surprising. They expected the Pacific Rim would have a fairly good Asian response. But this idea that a member of the People's Liberation Army wrote in a state-backed daily newspaper that it is seen as a mouthpiece for the country's military, that this film is part of the domination of Chinese cultural heritage or something along those lines. Yeah, I don't know if that's what they're after. I think they're just after the cash, personally. But
exactly. I think isn't it funny though? Like, don't worry, if this happened in the States, there'd be all sorts of conspiracy theorists on the net, saying this. The fact is, in these cases, we know Hollywood doesn't actually think too deeply about this. I don't actually think that there's anything sinister about this at all. But it is interesting because culturally and significantly what they do is I think they set Pacific Rim, and the final battle seas are actually in the South China Sea. So there's disputed territories in there, and the fact is the Americans come in as they always do and, save the day. But, it's the region that this guy would be pointing to and saying, hey, what are they doing coming into our area and saving the day?
Yeah.
And I think that, I think the Americans, don't worry, China, they've done it in Australia as well, where they come in here and save the day as well. So I think it's just the way the Americans like to make their films.
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty, we'll move on to our science news bite. Super heavyweight element confirmed. This one from the ABC. It was quite interesting, this one. If you struggle remembering more than a dozen elements on the periodic table, your task just got harder with the discovery of chemical element 115. An international team of researchers led by physicists from Lund University have found evidence of a new super heavy element as part of an experiment at GSI research facility in Germany. So I remember having to learn the periodic table at school. I can remember a handful of elements, obviously, after all this time, but it's quite interesting that, it's being added to even now. Yeah,
well, they can, because they can. And these artificial elements, because they make them artificially, they basically get a couple of other atoms, squish them together, and typically they only last for not even milliseconds, like, millionths of seconds they last, and they can detect that it was there for a little time before it decayed, and then they say there's evidence of it. So it's not as if there's a block of this stuff sitting around anywhere. This stuff only exists because it's so unstable usually. It only exists for a very, very small amount of time.
So in that case, not much practical use then?
Or there's probably a lot of practical use, I would say, because it gives them a better understanding of chemical structures and how they can create probably new structures. But for us in everyday life, I don't know that we'll see much.
Well, like you said, there isn't a block of it lying around that we can use, is there?
No. This stuff typically decays very quickly. It's very unstable. So they'll normally get two very big atoms and just squish them together and hope that it's stable enough to last for a few thousandths of a second.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll move on to our tech news bite, our final one. Car technology leads drivers to distraction from the Sydney Morning Herald. Nothing too surprising here. As cars come packaged with more electronic devices, distracted drivers are contributing to more crashes across the state. The number of crashes on New South Wales roads in which driver distraction was a factor has doubled in less than a decade. 7 people were killed over 12 hours on Monday. Police believe that 6 of those crashes were caused by human error, including that which killed a 26-year-old woman who was reportedly on her phone. It's probably a good point. Maybe it's just more fuel for the argument of, you need some time to set your devices down and not look at them.
And look, it's so easy to do because we always think it won't happen to us, but you've got to turn your phone off and you just can't use them while you're driving. It increases your risk of a serious accident by 3 times.
Because even if you had a GPS unit stuck on your windscreen and it's directly in front of you, it's still a distraction. And here, if you're using your phone and you're looking down, it's just not good at all.
Absolutely, and people just have to stop. People just have to stop being distracted in cars. Having said that, Google obviously came out this week with their robotic car. Maybe this is now time for governments to say, okay, we don't want people driving anymore. You've got to get yourself a Google robotic car. And I'm not saying that to be funny either. I mean, it's going to have to happen at some stage. And robotic cars, certainly currently, are safer than humans as long as every other car on the road is a robotic car. You put one human in amongst them and you're going to have chaos.
Well, I'm sure there'll be an uproar because I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who won't want to be giving up their ability to drive.
But true, but look at the flip side. I mean, you could read a book just like you do on public transport while your car drives you there. I mean, unless you have specifically some great love of driving, which I must confess I once upon a time did until they lowered the speed limits to 40 kilometres an hour everywhere and, 80 kilometres an hour on highways. There's no joy in that. I might as well sit in the back, read a book, listen to music, play some games and get out when I get there.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. I can see that.
Well, seriously, because we are so busy now and this distraction thing is really important. Children have, things going on in the back. You're distracted looking after them. You're distracted, there's so much visual stuff in cars. And some of the manufacturers now, I think Holden here locally have a heads-up display and they're very important and very good things. But we have to make choices, I think, in terms of our technology. And if we really enjoy the distracting technology, if we like being 100% productive because we're always online and posting pictures of what we're driving past, and that sort of thing, then why wouldn't you go a robotic car?
Exactly. All right,
I'll take it up, Ben.
Yeah, that's for another time, perhaps. So we'll wrap it up there. So thanks again, Steve, for the chat.
Anytime. Tweet us, FiST Chat fans, if you'd like a robotic car.
Absolutely. All right, so that's it for this episode. So we'll catch you next time.